In a distant land called Elion, nestled between great mountains and vast plains, there stood a prosperous kingdom led by King Eliam. For decades, the kingdom thrived under his wise and just rule. But all that changed when a great drought swept across the land. The rivers dried, crops withered, and famine spread like a shadow over the people. King Eliam, burdened by the cries of his people, sought counsel from the kingdom's ancient oracle. The oracle, an old woman with eyes that seemed to pierce through time, told the king that the drought was a test. The gods of Elion required a sacrifice, a pure heart who would willingly embark on a dangerous journey to the forbidden peaks of Mount Aerolith to offer the sacred flame of renewal. This flame, she said, could only be carried by someone with unwavering faith and courage. Among the villagers was a humble potter named Dara, a young woman known for her kindness and resilience. Despite losing her parents to the famine, Dara worked tirelessly to provide for her younger brother Caleb. While others despaired, she remained hopeful, often gathering the children of the village to tell stories of heroes who overcame impossible odds. When the king announced the oracle's prophecy, a heavy silence fell over the kingdom. None dared to volunteer, for the journey to Mount Aerolith was fraught with dangers, treacherous terrain, wild beasts, and whispers of dark forces that had claimed countless lives before. Days turned into weeks, and the drought worsened. Crops failed entirely, and despair began to take root in even the strongest hearts. One evening, as Dara sat with her brother by the dying embers of their hearth, Caleb asked, "Do you think anyone will save us, Dara?" His voice trembled, his young face pale with hunger. Dara looked into his eyes, her heart aching with love and desperation. She knew she could not bear to see her brother perish like so many others. "I don't know, Caleb," she whispered. But deep down, she felt a stirring, a call she could not ignore. That night, as the kingdom slept, Dara made her decision. She would be the one to carry the sacred flame, no matter the cost. The next morning, Dara stood before the king, her hands trembling but her voice steady. "Your Majesty," she declared, "I will journey to Mount Aerolith." King Eliam studied her for a moment, his eyes heavy with sorrow and hope. "Do you understand the danger, child?" he asked. Dara nodded, her resolve unshaken. And so, the kingdom gathered to witness her departure. With a small satchel of provisions and the sacred flame enclosed in a crystal lantern, Dara set out on her journey, her brother's tearful gaze following her until she disappeared over the horizon. The road ahead was uncertain, but Dara knew one thing: she would not turn back. Dara's journey began with a quiet resolve. But as the first day stretched into the second, she realized the true weight of the task ahead. The path to Mount Aerolith was not just arduous, it was isolating. The plain stretched endlessly before her, the grass brittle and lifeless underfoot. Each step seemed to echo in the oppressive silence, a constant reminder of the despair she had left behind in her village. The sacred flame, encased in its crystal lantern, flickered faintly, as if mirroring her doubts. By the third day, Dara reached the edges of the barren plains, where the terrain began to shift into rocky outcroppings and dense forests. As she approached the forest, a strange unease crept over her. The villagers had long told stories of these woods, of spirits and creatures that roamed the shadows, preying on lost travelers. Still, Dara pressed forward, clutching the lantern tightly to her chest. The forest was alive with unfamiliar sounds, the rustling of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, and something else, something that seemed to follow her just out of sight. She walked cautiously, her eyes darting to every movement. Suddenly, a low growl broke the stillness. From the shadows emerged a pack of wolves, their eyes glowing eerily in the dim light. Dara froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The wolves formed a circle around her, their snarls growing louder. She knew she had no weapons, no way to fight them off. Trembling, she held the lantern high. The sacred flame flared brighter, casting a warm, golden glow that illuminated the wolves' faces. For a moment, they hesitated, their growls softening into whines. Then, as quickly as they had appeared, they melted back into the shadows, leaving Dara alone once more. Shaken but unharmed, she continued her journey through the forest. As night fell, she found shelter beneath a hollowed tree and lit a small fire. The warmth soothed her aching body, but her mind raced with questions. Why had the wolves retreated? Was it the flame, or something more? Her thoughts drifted to her brother, Caleb. She could still see his tearful face as he begged her not to go. "Be brave," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the crackle of the fire. The next morning, Dara awoke to find the forest alive with light. Sunbeams pierced through the canopy, and the once ominous woods seemed almost welcoming. Renewed with hope, she pressed onward, eventually emerging from the forest to find herself at the base of a massive cliff. Above her loomed the jagged peaks of Mount Aerolith, shrouded in mist. The climb was daunting. The rocks were sharp and unstable, and the air grew thinner with every step. As she ascended, her muscles burned, and her breaths came in ragged gasps. Hours turned into days, and Dara's strength began to wane. She rationed her food carefully, but it was never enough. Hunger gnawed at her, and the cold bit into her skin. One night, as she rested on a narrow ledge, she heard a voice. It was soft and melodic, almost like a song carried on the wind. "Turn back, child," it whispered. "This path is not for you." Dara sat up, her heart racing. She looked around, but saw no one. The voice came again, louder this time. "You are unworthy. Return to your village before it is too late." Fear and doubt surged within her. Was this the dark force the oracle had warned of? Closing her eyes, she gripped the lantern and focused on the flame. Its warmth seemed to seep into her very soul, calming her racing heart. "I will not turn back," she said firmly. "My people need me." As the voice faded, a sudden warmth enveloped her. When she opened her eyes, she saw a glowing figure standing before her, a woman draped in golden light. "You are stronger than I thought," the figure said, her voice kind but powerful. "The trials you face are meant to test your resolve, your faith. Do not waver, for the true challenge lies ahead." The figure vanished, leaving Dara in stunned silence. Though her body was weary, her spirit felt renewed. She climbed higher, the flame glowing brighter with each step. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she reached a plateau where the mountain's peak towered above her. There, she found a small, ancient temple carved into the rock. As Dara approached the temple, the air grew heavy with an almost tangible energy. The entrance was guarded by two massive statues of winged beasts, their stone eyes seeming to follow her every move. Inside, she knew, awaited the final trial, the ultimate test of her courage, faith, and selflessness. Dara stepped cautiously into the temple, the air thick with ancient energy. The interior was dimly lit, save for the glow of the sacred flame in her lantern. Intricate carvings covered the walls, depicting scenes of battles, sacrifices, and triumphs from ages past. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint hum of the flame. As Dara moved deeper into the temple, she felt the weight of unseen eyes watching her every step. At the center of the temple stood a massive chamber, its walls adorned with shimmering crystals that reflected the light of the flame. In the middle of the room, a pedestal rose from the ground, upon which rested a golden chalice. Surrounding the pedestal were three large doors, each marked with an enigmatic symbol: a serpent, a flame, and a tree. Dara hesitated, unsure of what to do next, when a deep, resonant voice echoed through the chamber. "Seeker of the sacred flame, you have come far," the voice boomed. "But to prove your worth, You must face the trials of mind, heart, and spirit. Choose a door and let your test begin. Dara's hands trembled as she studied the symbols on the doors. Each one seemed to call to her in a different way, but she felt an inexplicable pull toward the door marked with the serpent. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward and pushed it open. Behind the door lay a dark, winding corridor that seemed to stretch endlessly. The walls were covered in shifting shadows, their shapes forming unsettling images. Figures of villagers she knew, their faces twisted in pain and despair. Voices echoed around her, whispers that grew louder with every step. You left us, the voices accused. You abandoned us to save yourself. You are no hero, just a coward in disguise. Dara's heart ached at the words. Doubt crept in, gnawing at her resolve. Were they right? Had she been selfish in taking on this quest, leaving her family and her village behind? She clutched the lantern tightly, the warmth of the flame reminding her of her purpose. I am doing this for them, she whispered, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. For all of them, the corridor ended abruptly, opening into a circular chamber filled with mirrors. Each mirror reflected a different version of Dara, some young and carefree, others older and burdened. One reflection, however, caught her eye. It showed her dressed in fine clothes, sitting on a throne, surrounded by wealth and adoration. Abandon your quest, a voice whispered from the mirror. Take this life instead. You will be loved, revered, and never know hardship again. Dara stepped closer, mesmerized by the image. It was everything she had ever dreamed of, a life of comfort, free from pain and struggle. But as she reached out to touch the mirror, the light of the flame dimmed, and a cold chill filled the room. She froze, her hand hovering inches from the glass. No, she said firmly, pulling her hand back. This is not my path. The mirror shattered, and the room dissolved into a blinding light. When Dara opened her eyes, she was back in the central chamber of the temple. The voice spoke again, its tone approving. You have passed the trial of the mind. You see through illusion and resist temptation. But your journey is far from over. The serpent door closed behind her, and Dara turned to face the two remaining doors. This time, she chose the door marked with the tree. Inside, she found herself in a lush, vibrant garden. The air was filled with the scent of flowers and the sound of birdsong. It was beautiful, almost idyllic, but Dara couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. In the center of the garden stood an ancient tree, its branches heavy with golden fruit. At its base sat a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Welcome, traveler, the woman said. You have endured much. Rest here, eat from the tree, and let your journey end in peace. Dara hesitated. The fruit looked tempting, its golden skin shimmering in the sunlight. She was starving, her body weak from the climb, and the idea of rest was alluring. But something about the woman's words felt off. I can't, Dara said, stepping back. I haven't finished my quest. My people are still in danger. The woman's smile faltered, her kind eyes hardening. Foolish child, she hissed, her voice losing its warmth. Do you think your sacrifice will change anything? Stay here, and you will know only happiness. Continue, and you will face only pain. Dara shook her head. I will face whatever comes, she said, her voice steady. I won't abandon my people. The woman let out a furious cry, her form dissolving into smoke. The garden withered around Dara, the vibrant colors fading into ash. When the smoke cleared, Dara was back in the central chamber. The voice spoke once more. You have passed the trial of the heart. You remain steadfast in your purpose, even in the face of comfort and ease. One final trial awaits. Dara turned to the final door, marked with the flame. Her heartbeat quickened as she stepped toward it. She had passed the trials of mind and heart, but the weight of the final challenge pressed heavily on her. The voice spoke again, its tone both solemn and expectant. The final trial will test your spirit. The path ahead will demand everything. Only those with the courage to give all may proceed. As Dara pushed the door open, an intense wave of heat struck her. The room beyond was engulfed in fire. Walls of roaring flames stretched endlessly into the distance. At the center of the inferno stood a single narrow path of stone, barely wide enough for one footstep at a time. The flame in her lantern flickered wildly, as if alive and urging her forward. Dara stepped cautiously onto the path, feeling the searing heat licking at her skin. Each step was an ordeal. Sweat poured down her face, and her legs trembled under the strain. The fire seemed alive, twisting and roaring, as if testing her resolve. Halfway across the path, she heard cries for help. Looking to her left, she saw the faces of her village. Men, women, and children, trapped in the flames, reaching out to her. "Save us," they screamed. On her right, she saw her family, her mother, father, and little brother, crying in agony, their faces contorted in pain. Dara froze, torn. The path ahead still stretched into the distance, but the cries were unbearable. She looked at the flame in her lantern, its light steady despite the chaos around her. She realized this was not just a test of her strength, but of her spirit, her ability to stay true to her mission despite the temptation to turn back. "I can't save you now," Dara whispered, tears streaming down her face. "But I will save you. I promise." With renewed determination, she pressed on, blocking out the cries and focusing on the light of the flame. Each step felt like an eternity, but finally, she reached the end of the path. The fire around her died down, leaving her standing in a dark, silent chamber. In the center of the room was a stone altar. On it rested an ornate chalice, glowing faintly with a golden light. The voice spoke again, this time softer, almost kind. "You have endured the trials of mind, heart, and spirit. But one final test remains. To save your people, you must give of yourself. The chalice will hold your sacrifice, and the flame will carry it to the heavens. Are you prepared to give all for the ones you love?" Dara hesitated, her hand hovering over the chalice. What did it mean to give all? Would she lose her life? Her soul? She thought of her family, her village, and the people who depended on her. Her purpose was clear. "I am ready," she said, her voice steady. As she placed the lantern on the altar and touched the chalice, a surge of energy coursed through her. The flame leapt from the lantern, filling the room with a brilliant golden light. Dara felt her strength drain, her body growing weaker with each passing moment. She fell to her knees, but a sense of peace washed over her. The light dimmed, and the chalice began to glow brighter, pulsating with a warm, life-giving energy. Dara's vision blurred, and she collapsed onto the floor. The last thing she saw was the flame rising toward the heavens, carrying her sacrifice. When Dara awoke, she was outside the temple. The chalice lay beside her, its glow now soft and steady. She was weak but alive, and the flame in her heart burned brighter than ever. As she looked out over the valley, she saw her village in the distance, its fields green and vibrant once more. The drought had ended. Carrying the chalice, Dara made her way home. The villagers greeted her with tears of joy and gratitude, their faith in her renewed. She had proven herself not just a seeker of the flame, but its guardian, a symbol of hope and sacrifice. Dara placed the chalice in the center of the village, where it glowed as a reminder of what she had endured and the power of the flame. Her story became a legend, inspiring generations to come to face their own trials with courage and selflessness. And though Dara never sought recognition, she knew that her spirit had touched the lives of those she loved, and that was enough.